Hello and good day to all as we welcome St. Lucia, the Caribbean and the world, viewers at home and abroad on another journey into the unknown with our presenters and our NTN team in what we hope will be another memorable event on the last day of August in St. Lucia's Emancipation Month 2022 calendar of activities. Today, we feature two very prominent and excellent main presenters representing the Caribbean and Africa, two veritable excellencies, two established veteran diplomats representing the two regions of people of African descent. And I speak of Her Excellency, the Honorable Dr. June Soomer, the CARICOM representative on the United Nations Permanent Forum for People of African Descent, and, of course, Her Excellency Dr. Arikana Chihombori-Quao, President of the African Diaspora Development Institute, better known as ADDI. And we will hear a lot from our esteemed excellencies today, as well as from Ambassador Damien Dublin of Dominica. And if you thought that was all, we'll also hear from the Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, and the Executive Director of the United Nations Fund for Population Activities, UNFPA. So folks, we are prepared and ready to take you into today's promised activity. I am 𝐿𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵, and today we journey into the who, what, when, where, why, and how about today being the second annual International Day for People of African Descent, designated by the United Nations and being observed across the Caribbean and the world. So we will be, in fact, we do know that celebrations are taking place today as we speak in Antigua and Barbados, the Bahamas, Jamaica, at the World Health Organization and the United Nations Fund for Population Activities. And of course, the Pan American Health Organization will be hosting later today, this afternoon, immediately after this session, an international panel on advancing the right to health for people of African descent. So, by way of historical coincidence, today is also the day when Trinidad and Tobago observes its 60th independence anniversary. Yes, folks, 60 years since Dr. Eric Williams, who wrote the classic book Capitalism and Slavery, became the first Prime Minister of the Twin Islands state. And today is also the timely occasion of the first session of the new Grenada Parliament following recent general elections in June. The Grenada Parliament starting a brand new session on the International Day for People of African Descent with St. Lucia's Prime Minister Philip J. Pierre and other fellow Caribbean leaders also attending. But here today, our full attention is on the second International Day for People of African Descent, and we have lined up to take us through the journey in connection with 2022 between Africa and the Caribbean, and of course why the International Forum and the International Decade are both important for St. Lucia and the Caribbean and the whole wide world. And breaking news, folks, today we will also witness history being made right here just now. The launch of the St. Lucia branch, the St. Lucia chapter of a global African entity dedicated to walking the talk about uniting people of African descent in ways we can help each other and grow together. But before I introduce my guests, let's learn a bit about the historicity of today. Let's receive today's special message from the United Nations. It's coming up in the following video.
People of African descent light the world with a rich culture and shared history, with strength, determination, and resilience, with fearless calls for equality and justice. They light the world despite the legacy of enslavement, racism, and underdevelopment. For women of African descent, there is a double burden. However, injustice and inequality is not fate, not set in stone. People of African descent are rising up against injustice and calling everyone to end hatred and division, which diminish all of us in the end. We can only face such challenges once we band together. And on this International Day for People of African Descent, let us agree to make racism history, to come together with one heart, and to leave no one behind. The just and inclusive future we dream of depends on it.
And of course, that was our special video. And now we go through a special statement issued yesterday out of Switzerland by the Permanent Forum for People of African Descent. And I will read this statement to you as the following. And like I said, it is out of Geneva, and it says that the people of African descent continue to face racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance, including human rights violations related to violent and excessive use of force by law enforcement agencies, a group of UN experts have said today. And on the occasion of the second annual International Day for People of African Descent, the United Nations Permanent Forum of People of African Descent issues the following statement. And it says, the United Nations Permanent Forum of People of African Descent is pleased to commemorate the second International Day for People of African Descent. The International Day was established by the United Nations General Assembly in 2020 in recognition of the diverse heritage, culture, and extraordinary contributions of people of African descent in all facets of the globe. At present, the International Day highlights the remaining barriers impeding the full and effective enjoyment of all human rights by people of African descent, with the view to eliminating those barriers and to guaranteeing reparations for the impacts of systemic racism. Joining communities from around the world, the Permanent Forum membership will observe the International Day for People of African Descent today, as well as in Cartagena in Colombia from the 5th to the 8th of September. There, we will engage with a wide variety of stakeholders, mark commitments to the global struggle for racial equality, and celebrate the diverse global communities of people of African descent. On 31st August 1920, Marcus Garvey and an organization of thousands of people of African descent from more than 20 countries met at Madison Square Garden in New York City and adopted a statement on the human rights of Africans and people of African descent, denouncing how they were systematically discriminated against and denied the common rights due to human beings for no other reason than their color. We are committed to following the path in recognition that the task has not yet been completed. We recognize the international issues, and we look at the legacy of the transatlantic trade in enslaved Africans, colonialism, systemic racism, oppressive security, and carceral systems and inequalities, driving the inequalities and the access to health care and treatment evident during COVID-19 pandemic in the disproportionately higher mortality and morbidity for people of African descent. Some progress has been made in the implementation of the Durban Declaration and the Program of Action, and in the implementation of the Program of Activities of the International Decade for People of African Descent. However, we remain deeply concerned about all contemporary forms of racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance by people of African descent, including human rights violations connected to violent and excessive uses of force by law enforcement agencies. As United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres said of the International Day last year, and I quote, "It is long overdue recognition of the profound injustices of systemic discrimination that people of African descent have endured for centuries and continue to confront today." We in the forum appreciate the people of African descent and the advocacy addressing systemic racism and structural inequalities, more recently and adamantly in the moves of climate change, natural disasters, and areas of unemployment, shrinking spaces, violence, stigma, and discrimination. We dedicate ourselves to building of this work together, advance the human rights of all people of African descent. We remain absolutely committed to an agenda of equality, justice, and reparations in alignment with the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the commitment to leave no one behind. The Permanent Forum is a consultative body and mechanism for people of African descent and other stakeholders, and we will hold the first of our annual sessions at the United Nations office in Geneva from the 5th to the 8th December of this year, which will include action-oriented plenary discussions, side events, and cultural elements. We have also sought the views of civil society organizations promoting the rights of people of African descent to inform the drafting of the United Nations Declaration in all respects, the Declaration of Human Rights of People of African descent. Supporting the elaboration of the Declaration is a key aspect of the Permanent Forum's mandate as set out in General Assembly Resolution 75314. And that, folks, was a statement from the United Nations Forum for People of African Descent, of which Ambassador June Soomer is the CARICOM representative on the permanent forum. And now for a message from our CARICOM partners, and this one is coming from the chair of the Dominica National Reparations Committee, the island's ambassador to Costa Rica, and its commissioner on the CARICOM Reparations Commission. Handing you over to Ambassador Damien Dublin.
I am Dr. Damien Dublin, Chairman of the Dominica Reparations Committee. I would like to express solidarity with the St. Lucia National Reparations Committee and the National Cultural Foundation on this joint activity to commemorate the United Nations declared International Day for Peoples of African Descent on May 31st. This day brings to mind the contribution of Africa to world civilization, world history, world heritage, and also the descendants of Africa's contribution in all spheres of global development. We note that you have two distinguished guest presenters, esteemed Ambassador Joan Soomer, and also Arikana Chihombori-Quao, who is now the president of the Africa Diaspora Initiative, and also former ambassador of the African Union to the United States. We also want to reiterate that the struggle for reparations is a just and ethical one, and commend the CARICOM Reparations Commission, the Center for Reparations Research, and all the National Reparations Committee within CARICOM as we jointly push this struggle for reparatory justice and reparations. We call on the St. Lucians and all other people of the Caribbean to make note, find out about this struggle, and get involved. Together, we will succeed. Once again, solidarity, and I wish for successful activity.
Thank you, Ambassador Damien Dublin. And of course, we continue with our program, and here is where we introduce our guest speaker, Ambassador Dr. Arikana Chihombori-Quao. And of course, folks, I've done the research. Dr. Arikana Chihombori-Quao is the president of the African Diaspora Development Institute, ADDI, and the immediate past ambassador of the African Union to the United States, and the lady chosen by Ghana to lead the establishment of Wakanda, the City of Return, as a tourism project aimed at the African diaspora and people of African descent everywhere. I just viewed a video last night presenting two top women of Africa, and it featured Winnie Mandela and Arikana Chihombori-Quao. Ambassador Arikana, speaking to us from Zimbabwe, will be delivering her message officially to launch the St. Lucia chapter of the ADDI branch, following which we will hear a message from the chair and a local ADDI chapter, Kofi Dovor, accompanied today by the chapter's secretary, Alfia Valmo. Over to you, Ambassador Arikana.
Thank you so much, my brother, for the introduction. And I would like to take the opportunity to thank all of you for putting such an important event to celebrate the International Day for People of African Descent. More importantly, I want to thank the St. Lucia National Reparations Committee for all the hard work and continuing to keep the memories alive, continuing to remind us that we must never ever forget the journey that we have traveled, that we must never ever forget that while we have moved mountains, we are far, far, very far away from reaching the promised land. Ours is a journey of suffering, it's a journey of hardship, it's a journey that no other group of people have ever been through. Sadly, the systems that were put in place to keep us where they want us to be remain alive and well today. What I find quite astonishing, what I find quite perplexing, is why that over 400 years later, since the children of Africa were taken out of the continent, that we have been absolutely failed to undo the damage. It takes me then back to what I consider the 7 pillars of how we have been kept where they want us to be. What I call sin number 1 is what they did to us with the mind. I often talk about the educational systems. Why is it that in 2022, we're still using colonial textbooks? Why haven't we changed the syllabuses so we can begin to speak the truth and nothing but the truth? How do we begin to make that turn, that we can begin to raise children that grow up knowing that as a person of African descent, be it a male or a female, you are the mother and father of humanity. You belong on the tallest pedestal. The question is, do our children know that? Are we teaching them the truth that you gave birth to humanity? Our textbooks, be it in the Caribbean, be it in Africa, remain and continue to teach colonial history the way they wanted us to learn it. I call it sin number 1, lie number 1. When we were told that we are inferior and that they are superior. You got to remember, before they came to Africa, they were not white. Before they came to Africa, we were not black. But when they came to Africa, they found some most amazing people, intelligent, totally indestructible people, and they wondered, how are we going to conquer such a people? So they set out to put a plan in place to make us, I like to say the superior beings, but I won't say that. They set out a system to make us feel inferior and make them feel superior. So yes, we went to school and they taught us about the different colors, red, green, yellow, black, white. But out of all those colors, they focused on 2. They gave attributes to the color white. They gave attributes to the color black. Black was associated with everything bad and undesirable, and white was associated with everything beautiful and desirable. Then they said, let's go to church. And they told us about a place called heaven. And they told us there were beings called angels who are always beautiful and they do good things and that we should all aspire to become angels. And by the way, we are white like the angels, even though they don't look like that white piece of paper that they just told us about in school. Never mind what we taught you in school about the color white. Just know that we are white like the angels. And we said, okay, never questioned it. Blatant lie. And then said, oh, by the way, there's a place called hell. There is a devil there who does all the horrible things and you must shy away from the devil. And by the way, that devil is black, like you. You may not look like that black sheet of paper we told you about in school, but never mind that. You are black like the devil. And we said, okay, another lie. Centuries of this lie. To this day, we have never called it out. I've never seen a human being who looks white like the color white. So why is it that we continue to call them white? And keep in mind, when we call them white, we're equating them to the angels. And we're worshiping the angels. We're worshiping Jesus Christ. We're worshiping them. Subliminal messages. Subliminal messages that continue to this very day. Subliminal messages that make it difficult. That quite often when we as people of color are in the same room with those that they call themselves white when they're not white, we are automatically defeated. Somehow we can't seem to challenge them. Somehow we can't seem to call them out. Somehow whatever they say, we automatically assume is good and better. Line number one, the question I have for you, my brothers and sisters, when are we going to call a spade a spade? It is a simple concept with profound implications. Some of you may remember the little experiment that was done with the children, given black dolls and white dolls, and the children were both black and white. And when asked to pick what doll they wanted, of course, all the little white girls chose white dolls. That's understandable. But when it came to the little black girls, they all chose white dolls. And when asked why, they said, because the black dolls are ugly. Now, no self-respecting mother, no self-respecting aunt, uncle, father would have taken a 5-year-old and sat them down and said, oh, the way you look is ugly. Those kids, nobody had ever told them that the way they look is ugly, but there are subliminal messages all around them that depict that the way you look is undesirable. It all goes back to line number one. It all goes back to the system that was put in place to implement white supremacy. The question I have for you all today is, how long is this lie going to continue? How long are we going to continue to follow this system that they put in place, starting in Africa, to defeat us where it matters the most, the mind? How long is it going to take for each and every one of us to have a serious conversation with the image in the mirror? How long? It's not good enough that United Nations has to tell us, decade of people of African descent, come on now, I don't need anybody to tell me that if I know who I am. When is the decade of people of whatever the color they are? I don't want to call them white because they are not white. How long, my brothers and sisters, are we going to continue to be lied to have them dictate who we are, tell us how we should behave and think? How long will we continue to be stupid? We're the mothers and fathers of humanity. We belong on the tallest pedestal. And we must understand that those who put us where we are today, no matter where you find us as people of African descent, they will not pave the way for us to take our rightful place. And for us to win this war against white supremacy, it's going to take all of us understanding our history, understanding what they are doing to us to keep us where they want us to be, understand the geopolitics of this world. Look at the World Bank. Look at the loans that are given to countries that are made up of people of color, people of African descent. World Bank is giving these frivolous, criminal loans to Africans and Caribbean countries because their sheer survival is based on our failures. Look at the world trade policies that are skewed against countries like in the Caribbean and in Africa. It's all by design. So we can forever be subservient. We can ever be the consumers of their products. And when it comes to Africa, our own natural resources that are being siphoned out of Africa, value added outside, and back to us again, just consumers. Let's understand the multinationals that never left the islands, never left Africa when we were given, quote unquote, which is fake, because we are not free. We were given fake independence, but economic liberation was denied from us to this day. And it is with us understanding those systems, with us understanding that for Africa to succeed, for Africa and her children, no matter where you find them, to succeed, Africa must be free. And for Africa to be free, Africa must understand that we must speak with one voice. Truly speak with one voice. Africa needs a single African currency. Africa needs its own monetary policy. Africa needs its own stock exchange. Africa needs its own military. Africa must have its own trade policy. Yes, we have the African Continental of Free Trade Area, but this implementation is going to be a monster. Its implementation is going to be marred with all kinds of infiltrations to make sure that it doesn't succeed. They never thought the African heads of states would come together and agree on something. This was the first. And now that they were able to come together and agree, which was the first, and they're making sure that its implementation is not going to be a success. Unless we come together as a people, unless we understand that we don't have to love each other, but when it comes to issues pertaining to us, we must stick together like super glue, just like others have done. Having resided in the United States for many years, when you ask for the voices of the Chinese diaspora loud and clear, ask for the voices of the Jews, ask for the voices of the Irish, the Indian diaspora, all loud and clear, they stick together when it comes to issues pertaining to their survival. Something that we, as people of African descent, have failed to do. The question then becomes, my brothers and sisters, as we celebrate this decade of people of Africa, where is your mind? How do you feel about who you are? Are you comfortable with our circumstances as a people? On an individual basis, what have you done to play your part? That's why I'm so proud of the St. Lucia National Reparations Committee. You continue to sound that clarion call. You continue to remind us once again that we deserve to have reparations. We never invaded anybody. The Japanese, look at them. Look at Pearl Harbor. They got their reparations. The Jews, they got their reparations. But when it comes to us, people of African descent, the standards change. What's wrong with you, people of African descent? You don't need reparations. You ought to be glad that we came to invade Africa. As we speak today, my brothers and sisters, every former colonizer, they have remains of our ancestors, their heads in jars in their basements throughout Europe. And they refuse to give them back to us. And you know why? They refuse to give them back to us because their heads were classified as trophies of conquest. Trophies of conquest, right next to the head of a lion. And we, people of African descent, are doing nothing about it. How long do you think the finger of a British soldier lasts in Kenya? How long do you think a toe of a German soldier lasts in Namibia? Not even an hour. They would storm into those countries, kill thousands of people just to recover that tiny little body part. But as we speak today, we are not accusing them of murder. We are simply asking for the remains of our ancestors so we can give them proper burial. You see, they don't want that. Because if we give them proper burial, then there's going to be a gravesite, which is a monument that we can take our children and tell them the history of this ancestor and what they did and the uprising and the resistance that they stood up with nothing and fought the British and won, and fought the Germans and fought the Italians and fought the Portuguese and fought all of them. They don't want that history. They don't want those monuments. So yes, while we celebrate the United Nations International Day for People of African Descent, I am saying to the United Nations, you are the institution that's supposed to fight human rights abuses all over the world. What have you done about this gross abuse of Africa? What have you done to stop the carnage? And yet the same people with the skeletons and the body parts still in their basements, they come to us and they want to talk to us about human rights. Hello, United Nations, where are you? So please don't give us these nonsense proclamations. We want real issues dealt with. We want the World Bank to stop giving these frivolous loans to the Caribbean nations, to the African nations, nations that have never defaulted on their loan repayment. Why are they getting 10, 15, 20% interest rates? Answer that question, United Nations. That is your job. Of course, you're not going to answer because you're part of the problem. Nations that have abided by the rule of law. Nations whose economies have completely collapsed outside Africa, they get better interest rates than African nations and Caribbean nations that have never defaulted on their loans, whose economies have never crashed. United Nations, as we celebrate International Day for People of African Descent, what are you doing about these blatant abuses? That's your job. So yes, we are and stop playing games with us. We want real facts to be addressed, starting with the remains of our ancestors. We want them back. And until we get those simple, blatant abuses addressed, keep your little frivolous proclamations. We don't need them. We want real results. We are asking United Nations to play its part and do the right thing and stop playing with us. We don't have time for those games anymore. We are done. So yes, I know we have some United Nations representatives, and please take that message over. We want to start with our remains being declassified as human beings and not as trophies of conquest. How embarrassing is that? Yes, happy International Day for People of African Descent. We're only asking that United Nations do what is right, do what is just, do what is fair, and above all, do what you were constituted to do. Protect and defend human rights, starting with correcting the murders of our ancestors and bringing their remains back home for proper burial. Happy International Day for People of African Descent. I thank you.
Ambassador Arikana. And folks, Ambassador Arikana is also an author. She's a medical doctor as well. If we have to say the amount of things she's responsible for and has done, we might not have enough time. One of her latest contributions to people of African descent is this book, Africa 101, The Wake-Up Call. And this book, written by Her Excellency Ambassador Arikana Chihombori-Quao, is available on Amazon. But folks, we started late and we have to move on, so we will go directly into the introduction of our main presenter, Dr. June Soomer. And of course, Dr. Soomer is St. Lucia's, she was St. Lucia's ambassador to CARICOM and the OECS. She was also the Secretary General of the Association of Caribbean States. And at present, last November, she was nominated by St. Lucia and accepted by CARICOM heads of government as the CARICOM representative on the United Nations Permanent Forum for people of African descent. So without further ado, let's go over to Ambassador Dr. June Soomer. Over to you, Dr. Soomer.
Thank you very much, Earl. And I would like to start my presentation, if the host will give me the ability to do that, to share. I'm trying to share my screen. So if you are able to give me that ability, I will go ahead and do that. But in the meantime, let me say, what a powerful presentation by our previous speaker. She really hit the nail on the head many, many, many times. And she gave us direction as well as giving us inspiration for us to be able to move forward with not just the day, the people of African descent, but also moving forward with regard to the diaspora and how we look at days that are allotted to us. Well, because of the fact that I am getting messages saying low bandwidth, I'm going to stop my video while I'm doing the presentation, but I will come back on when I'm finished with the presentation. So today, I'm looking at beyond the decade and why the United Nations Permanent Forum of People of African Descent is important to the Caribbean. And before I start, I'd like to thank the government of St. Lucia for nominating me to the Permanent Forum. I will continue to represent and call for the rights of humanity for all people, a call that people of African descent has placed on the global agenda. It is us who have put this call forward for the humanity that we deserve and the humanity that all people deserve in the world. And as St. Lucia continues to raise awareness during this season of emancipation education, it is certainly my honor to once again share with you some insights into how people of African descent are adapting and organizing in the post-emancipation period, and why continuity is important as we seek redress for the wrongs which continue to be perpetuated against people of African descent. My screen is not moving. Whoever is in charge of the presentation. I think I will have to do it like this. Can you see the screen?
No.
No.
Okay, thank you. Today, I want to share with you that as we observe the second anniversary of the UN's International Day of People of African Descent, that really it is 102 years since the 1920 meeting of approximately 25,000 people of African descent met in New York to speak against the global discrimination, inequality, and racism, which was based on skin color. At this meeting, people like the national hero of Jamaica, Marcus Garvey, clearly objected to the partitioning of Africa by Europe and demanded that Africa was for the Africans at home and abroad. Very much what Ambassador just said, that we want to be treated fairly and justly, and we demand that for all of us, then as they spoke and in the future. And that is why it is important that we look at the United Nations Permanent Forum of People of African Descent and what it means to the Caribbean. And perhaps the declaration of Global African Diaspora Summit in 2012 says it's best, that we must continue to build a strong foundation if there is to be an African Renaissance. This declaration, which you can all read, speaks to how Africa is supposed to engage with its diaspora, with the rest of us, with the sixth region. And as we move more into the presentation, you will hear a little more about the sixth region. In order to build on my opening statements, I wish to say that this is the outline of my presentation, that I will speak about the Decade of People of African Descent, 2015 to 2024. Imagine a decade, only one decade, to address the issues that confronted us for more than 400 years. We will speak about the Permanent Forum of People of African Descent, which I am part of right now. Some of the challenges facing the Permanent Forum, and I think that by looking at some of these challenges, we'll be able to see some of the issues repeating themselves and why they continue to repeat themselves as we move along. We'll look at Africa's sixth region, which is the diaspora. And finally, we will look at why the Permanent Forum is important to CARICOM after the decade, and I will move into some conclusions after that. The Decade of People of African Descent, 2015 to 24, means that we only have 2 years left.
Soomer, you can share your slides now.
Oh, so you're not seeing my slides now?
But you can do it now, yes, because you had stopped your video.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought that we had, that I was able to, that you people were seeing the slides.
No, you can now.
Okay, well, hold on a second. Let me
we've had a
go
photograph.
back to sharing. Share. Can you see it now?
Not yet. Yes, it's yes. You go ahead and we'll get it on. The technicians say continue.
All right, because I am moving on to slide 5 right now, on which I'm speaking about the Decade of People of African Descent.
Yes, they have you.
And saying that we only have 2 years left to achieve the many goals and reverse many injustices that have been entrenched for centuries. And we are saying that, can you see it now? I did see something come up on my screen.
Yes, it's okay now.
All right, thank you very much. I'm saying that there are more than 20 million people of African descent living in the Americas and many more throughout the diaspora. And that we are a distinct group, as it is said in the decade, and that there are certain things that must be done to bring us back, to make us, as they said, equal with the rest of the world. You know, I'm going to be like the ambassador and not say the white world, but we know exactly whom we're talking about. We are talking about the fact that we need recognition, that there is a right to equality and non-discrimination. Imagine at this stage, we're still talking about equality of education and raising awareness. We are talking about information gathering, that is data collection, that we have been making decisions, especially at the level of organizations like the UN, where we don't have the statistics. What are we saying about people of African descent? We are always estimating. We are not having accurate statistics. How can we have proper decision-making in that regard? And we are also talking about participation and inclusion, when we know that usually we are on the periphery, that inclusion is not something that we see happening anytime or anytime soon. And one of the things that I want to say in that regard, especially when we look at things like access to justice, access to to education, to employment, to health, and to housing, which are the things that are supposed to be addressed during the decade of people of African descent, is that it has taken 4 decades for us to see that we have to remove or decolonize our systems for us to be able to be included socially, for us to be included within programs throughout the world, for us not to continue to live on the periphery of societies. I am not too sure that the decade of people of African descent is going to achieve the things that has been set out in that decade. In fact, I don't think that we are going to, as we look at what has been happening recently, there seems to be an increased attack against people of African descent. So as we move forward, we are being pushed back. But I want to say that we have to push on with the struggle. We cannot, as people of African descent, throw up our arms and say, why are we doing this? These are some of the arguments that we hear within the reparations discussions that we are having in St. Lucia. Why are we doing this? We are not going to get anywhere. We are not going to get reparations for what has been done to us. We are not going to get any more from institutions that have been set up by people who have colonized us. There will be nothing called decolonization, that we will continue to live as we are. But we cannot throw up our arms as people of African descent and say, nothing will happen for us. What we have to say instead is that we have to be able to move these things forward for ourselves. And so when I reach my conclusion, you will be hearing me calling for even deeper integration with Africa, with the rest of the diaspora, where it's not only the diaspora in the Americas, but in Europe, in Asia, etc. We all have to fight together for this cause, and we need the leadership of our countries to step forward in this way. And that is why it is important for us to have a permanent forum. You cannot, in many ways, you cannot be on the outside and expect to change what is on the inside. And we are now on the inside of the United Nations, and we have to bring the attack inside for us to get the reforms that we need. Let me move quickly to the 6th region. But before I do that, I want to say that there are some people who are calling for another decade because it seems that racism, inequality, and discrimination has intensified. And that is true, but I don't think that we need another decade. I think that we have had a decade where we have put our issues on the agenda. We now have to forge ahead as people of African descent and move forward with ensuring that the things that we have called for are in place. And we must be on the front line. Yes, other people can assist us in that regard, but we must be on the front line to ensure that these things happen. One of the issues around the permanent forum, which started last year when we were appointed to the permanent forum in November of last year. Let me give you a little background to this permanent forum that we have been talking about. This permanent forum has 10 members. 5 of them were elected by the UNGA. I was elected by the UNGA, and 5 were selected by the President of the Human Rights Council. And we have a very diverse membership. And during that period, we have 3 years to serve, and we could be appointed for another 3 years. We are expected to move a lot of the issues relating to the decade of people of African descent forward. Unfortunately for the Permanent Forum, like many things set up for people of African descent, we do not have the financing to do a lot of the work initially that is expected of us. And so we have to undertake a massive fundraising program throughout the region and throughout Africa. We will be calling on African governments, on African businesses to assist us in pushing these issues forward. We want also to be able to give a voice to the civil society groups like ours, the reparations committees of CARICOM, the reparations commission of CARICOM, to be able to give voice to what people in the Caribbean, people in the world are saying about reparations. But the funding is very limited. Right now, we only have funding for 25 groups to be able to attend our meeting. Imagine 25 civil society groups of people of African descent. We can find that on one island in the Caribbean. The other challenge that we face has to do with representation at the level of the leadership. Of course, we are independent experts and we reside in our own countries outside of the headquarters. So each time we have to be brought to headquarters to have these discussions, or we have to meet virtually. And we have not met physically for over almost a year for us to be able to discuss these issues. And then we find ourselves having to look at issues like representation. I think like a region like the Caribbean that has been at the forefront of the movement from the days of resistance to enslavement must have a voice that is very strong within this forum for us to be able to move the decade forward and for us to be able to move the issues of people of African descent forward. There are only 10 of us. Imagine there are only 3 people who represent the continent on the forum. Only 3 people. I think that it is a disgrace and we need to call for more representation on this forum from Africa and from the Caribbean in particular. We also have to coordinate a lot of our activities with other relevant groups. There are 6 such relevant groups. We are probably never going to meet these groups physically for us to coordinate the activities. And so what the ambassador said with regard to a piecemeal approach to the issues confronting people of African descent are extremely clear to me from the very beginning of this. And you can rest assured, Ambassador, you can rest assured, Earl, that I will be raising my voice. I have raised my voice already. And I want us to be able to get the support from the civil society groups for us to be able to move these issues. These issues are not only governmental issues. In fact, before they were governmental issues, they were issues that the people spoke to. People like Marcus Garvey spoke to it. People like the Rastafarian group spoke to it. So why are we thinking right now that it is only governments who must be involved in these discussions? Let us bring all of our people on board. And it is only when our people speak with one voice, that we give them voice and we give them one voice, that we will be able to address the issues of people of African descent more effectively. Go back to the 6th region. And the 6th region, as you know, was declared by the African Union. And we have North Africa, West Africa, Central Africa, East Africa, Southern Africa, and plus the last region, which is the 6th region. Many people do not know that we are the 6th region. We are the 6th region, the people in the diaspora. Ambassador would know that because she is working with the diaspora grouping. And we have to be clear that it is when we come together that we'll be able to consolidate Africa's 6th region. We have a role to play in its development. And when we give voice to people, as I said, we will be able to consolidate this sixth region. Recently, the Pan-Africanist movement had a meeting in Ethiopia, where they spoke to the fact that we are supposed to have 20 seats within the AU for us to speak about diaspora issues. And since we have configured this region, that we do not see any more progress. And we would like the African Union, we appeal to the African Union to take the leadership in this area with regard to the sixth region, with regard to the diaspora. Yes, Africa has come together, but it must come together with its diaspora. And so why is this permanent forum so important to CARICOM? Let me say that we have very similar agendas. CARICOM with the Reparations Commission, with the recent voices being raised by our leaders, speak to the issues that are very important to the forum. These are all things that we are going to ensure enter the agenda for the forum for the December meeting. Anti-racism and equality, reparatory justice, decolonization. We live in a region of the world where there are still so many colonies that we need to speak to that. We need to speak to how we mentor our associate members into decolonization. We have to speak to ourselves also in regard to decolonization of our independence constitutions. We saw Barbados taking a step, and the rest of us must come together and also make these decisions and take these steps. How we speak to the issue of the decade of people of African descent, the issues around climate justice, the way in which extraction from Africa, how they have extracted the wealth of Africa, how extraction in the Caribbean because of enslavement has caused all of these climate issues that we are now having. How are we going to give voice to our civil society organizations and people of African descent? The issues surrounding the research, the data, how do we communicate these things? Many things are happening. This year in St. Lucia, we have taken a big communication agenda during Emancipation celebration to speak about these things. But how do we take this to the globe? How do we make this a global movement? I think that we need to be able to do that. How we work, how we develop, and how we enhance the various mechanisms that are already in place, and how we speak to the issue of systems and systematic racism, how the things that the ambassador spoke about, fair trade. Why is it primary products are getting have such a low value on the international market? On market development, how are the markets crowded and we cannot get our foods into these markets? We need to speak about food security, energy security, medical apartheid, all of the things that are affecting us. And these are the reasons why the permanent forum, once the decade has ended, will be able to speak to and be able to enhance CARICOM's agenda. There are discussions right now, in conclusion, let me say there are discussions right now with regard to making the 31st of August, as Marcus Garvey had called for it, as a public holiday. And I'm saying that whether or not it is a public holiday, it is a day when people of African descent are supposed to look at our integration with Africa and amongst ourselves and deepen that integration. Because I think together, that is what everybody else has realized, that together we can be a powerful force in the world. We have to continue to influence agendas globally. We have to find ways of amplifying the voices of our various groups, whether it is the Reparations Commission, youth groups, our women, our environmentalists, etc. And there's also a call for lobbying for another decade for people of African descent. I am also of the view that whether or not another decade comes, the rest of the century and centuries to come belong to people of African descent. I thank you very much.
Thanks, Ambassador, for your very interesting presentation on why the decade and the forum are important for the Caribbean, Africa, and people of African descent everywhere. And now we will have a brief discussion here on the presentations, and I'm hoping that Ambassador Arikana is still with us. Ambassador, in the meantime, I'd like to introduce Brother Kofi, who is the chair of the St. Lucia chapter of ADDI, the African Development
Diaspora.
African Diaspora Development Institute. Sorry, and of course, Kofi, welcome to today's program. And I did hear you on a radio program earlier in the week, in which you and the host went into detail in explaining to St. Lucia what difference the ADDI chapter will make. Tell us about the chapter, and we'll take it from there.
Thank you very much, Brother Buske. I'm very happy to be here, very humbled to be here with my sister, 𝐼𝐦𝐻𝐵 to espouse a little bit on ADDI, the St. Lucia chapter. Fortunately, we've been able to grab you as one of our main supporters to get today as the official launching date of ADDI St. Lucia chapter. Just to give a brief history, this whole movement started 2 years ago when in 2019 Dr. Arikana started trying to mobilize the whole diaspora. Some of us had been listening to her from that very beginning. So I quickly realized that we needed such force here in St. Lucia. So contacting persons like Ms. Valmore and so on, we decided to, set up a local chapter, which we did 2 years ago. And so, although we may be launching officially today, but the work had started 2 years prior. And a lot of groundwork had been done by Sister 𝐼𝐻𝐵 to make sure that, we're here today. So that's a bit of the background of how ADDI St. Lucia started. Talking about what the impact of ADDI, the local chapter, will do for us, it's a conversation we can have for days. But let's just narrow in a little bit into what Dr. Soomer and Dr. Arikana said to give context to this. If we move alone, we go fast. But if we move together, we go far. This simply means that if we want to get to realize the dreams and aspirations of people like Marcus Garvey, Kwame Nkrumah, and all these people, we can't go alone. St. Lucia alone cannot make it. Dominica alone cannot make it. All these African countries cannot make it alone. The only way we can make an impact and be respected as people of African descent is if we go together. And hence the reason why ADDI local chapter will fit in very well in trying to take all our concerns locally, present them as a group, even with our Caribbean brothers and sisters who also have chapters in the various islands, and present this together as the sixth region. And this is where some of the benefits, I heard the talk of the lack of finance. ADDI gives a pathway to be able to liberate ourselves. The whole idea of emancipation is to make sure that we emancipate ourselves financially, emotionally, in all forms. And so ADDI local chapter St. Lucia is poised to help, bring that gel together.
You mentioned economically, politically, and all of that. I will ask you in a while in terms of economically, because this is something that would make ADDI different than all other organizations where we just join for a membership. Dr. Soomer, you did mention the whole issue. Well, you made a particular appeal for more representation by civil society. You did offer some explanation, but for our listeners and viewers, why do you place emphasis on more civil society and less governmental and other institutional representation?
Thank you, Earl. I am not saying that there should be less governmental representation. I am saying that if we are doing work where we are representing millions and millions of people, as I said, over 200 million people only in the Americas, why do we have funding at the level of the United Nations for participation of only 25 civil society groups?
Are
we saying that African voices don't mean anything? I'm saying that there needs to be a move by the United Nations. First of all, if you are setting up such a body, for that, and we are supposed to develop a declaration that 10 governmental representatives on a forum cannot put forward a declaration that will espouse the views of all of the people of African descent. I'm saying, and more than that, Earl, you and I know that these 25 groups that they have identified are groups that have already been in place, that already have a voice within the United Nations system, that go to all of these meetings, and we do not feel that they represent us in many ways. And so new groups like ours, like the National Reparations Commission, will not get an opportunity to be represented, to say the things that we want to say. We have a very important message, I think, that needs to be brought to the United Nations. And I think that as people, our National Reparations Commission, for example, has people from a variety of different groups. So there are different voices within that group. And so we know what it is for us to listen to different voices on a small island like ours. Far less at the United Nations, where only groups that have the resources, that have the money, will be able to get a hearing. We want groups from Africa, we want groups from the Caribbean, we want groups from Latin America, we want groups from Europe, we want groups from the Pacific to have that voice, people of African descent globally, to have that voice. Our movement must be a global one. Our movement must be supported by our leaders, but our leaders represent our views, and if they do not hear our views, how are they going to effectively represent us? That is my argument.
Thank you, Dr. Soomer. I didn't get a certain response as to whether Ambassador Arikana is still with us. If she's still with us, could you tell us, Ambassador Arikana, your view on the extent to which Africa needs to identify with the CARICOM call for reparations from Europe for slavery and native genocide? The president of Ghana recently issued a statement supporting the CARICOM call for reparations and also calling for other members of the African Union to also join. What's your view on this?
I think she may have stepped away from her device because she's still logged on.
Yes.
But yesterday I presented on the African diaspora on the need for a CARICOM Africa diaspora policy. Mm-hmm. It was at a conference hosted by the University of Ghana and the Association of African Universities, UNESCO, etc. And I presented that paper calling for a clear diaspora policy between Africa and the Caribbean. And the reason I did that, I went through a number of different declarations that we have had in place from the 21st century. Only the 21st century ones. I looked at the diaspora conferences that we have had. I looked at some of the Pan-Africanist congresses, etc. And everybody's calling for deepening of relations. And I also looked at the CARICOM Africa conference last year, summit last year. And everybody's calling for deeper integration, and there have been plans set out and so on, but nothing that comes together in a structured policy that has an implementation timeline attached to it, as well as how we fund it. Because as I said, funding is extremely important for us to be able to implement these things. So if we don't have a clear way of funding these things, they just fall by the wayside. And we have been doing this for a decade. Remember that the first Pan-African conference was held in 1900. So more than a century later, we are calling for these things to happen. And if we do not put a structure in place to make sure that it happens and make people accountable to the citizens of the diaspora, then it will not happen. So I want to see that policy in place, and I think that I got a lot of support from the participants at that conference, and people are calling for more action now. Our action plans are not being implemented. People are calling for more action for us to see that these things happen and for us to be able to bring the unity and the integration that we want to see between Africa and its diaspora.
Thank you, Dr. Soomer. We only have 5 more minutes left. While you're on the floor, perhaps you could give us your closing remarks before I go over for closing remarks from Mr. Kofi and Ms. Valmore.
Thank you very much. Let me say, as always, it is an honor as a member of the St. Lucia Reparations Committee to be able to engage with St. Lucians on these issues. Granted, I am not in the country right now, but when I am there, I am always willing to have these audiences, especially with young people. I think that we have to involve our young people more in these discussions. They are the ones who are going to be the future of the country. In fact, they are already the present, and so they will be the future of the country. And they must have these kinds of dialogues with people who are involved at levels like mine with these issues that we address. I want you to know that this is not a cause only for St. Lucians, but it is a global cause, that we have to move these things beyond our national boundaries, beyond the region, and into the global arena for us to be able to get the support that we need. And Africa must be at the heart of all of these discussions, and we look forward to deepening the relationships with this diaspora group, African diaspora group in St. Lucia, and with all other diaspora groups globally, and certainly with the continent ultimately.
Thank you very much, Dr. Soomer. Let us have our first and last word from Ms. Valmore. You're the Secretary of ADDI Saint Lucia chapter. We heard of the amount of work, investment that you've put into it in terms of time in the 2 years leading to where we are. Briefly tell us what your expectations are for the St. Lucia chapter.
I'm very happy that Dr. Soomer brought up the issue of finance. Because this is one of the issues that ADDI tries to address. Some of our chapters have as many as 15,000 members, and we have come up with a simple formula. If people are able to even donate every month $10 US or $100 US, in no time you have millions of dollars. Instead of waiting for the UN or somebody to hand us funds, we can self-fund in a very simple form. And talking about is there a path, is there a concrete method for the deepening of relations between the Caribbean and Africa. In fact, there is a conference coming up, a Pan-African conference coming up from the 14th to the 19th of October in Zimbabwe this year, where the African Union is meeting with delegates across the globe of the diaspora to discuss a step-by-step formula for citizenship, residency, work permits, and how we can in fact find concrete ways to deepen the relationship between the diaspora and Africa.
Thank you, Atya, and we look forward to the chapter growing. You know, I normally, whenever I get an opportunity to share how we approach writing, I said the simplicity of writing is that we need to understand that there is no book that cannot be reduced to a chapter, no chapter that cannot be reduced to a sentence, no sentence that cannot be reduced to a word. And therefore, we look forward to the day when the chapter will be a very regular word in St. Lucia's vocabulary. Mr. Kofi, your closing remarks. Certainly, the St. Lucia National Reparations Committee will be looking to continue our association with the chapter, and therefore in future sessions like this we will be able to tell St. Lucians how they can be members and what can come out of it. But we only have a few minutes left, so your final remarks for today.
Okay, thank you so very much, Brother Whiskey. I think a lot has been said. We've heard two powerful speakers, very passionate, and I think that passion radiates even amongst ourselves as a local chapter. What we want to see happen is these issues of financial constraints can be resolved by us. We are the most disrespected race on the planet, and until we get to the point where we're able to emancipate ourselves financially and be able to dictate our own actions and our own deliverables, will continue to be disrespected. ADDI Saint Lucia is just an avenue from which ADDI Global has channeled a path where we can begin to do these things. You know, the concept of Susu. We can use this means to liberate ourselves from these financial strangulations from, you know, this powerful organization. So I want to say to our people that stay tuned, get in touch. Everybody should be a member of this because it can only get better.
Yes, and we certainly have to look forward to the dollars and cents of African diaspora development.
Absolutely.
And folks, we're coming to the end of the show, but like we did last time, we cannot end today's show without coming to some conclusions. And among those, the NRC wishes for your active consideration and support. Last week, we called for an official recognition of August 23 by CARICOM. Secondly, we called for a slave history project in St. Lucia and every CARICOM member state. Thirdly, we call for taking St. Lucia and the Caribbean authors from St. Lucia and the Caribbean to Caribbean schools. Fourth, we called for taking Creole to St. Lucian schools. Today, we want to add let us observe the International Day for People of African Descent every day of the year and not just on the 31st of August. And therefore, we make it a daily day of our lives, organizing activities all year round so that every year we can also review what we've done in the past 12 months. And we also want to call for the support for the St. Lucia chapter of the African Diaspora Development Institute, and we want to thank them for what we've heard today. And thirdly, let us share today's presentations throughout the year between now and August 31st, 2023. As with every good thing, folks, today's program comes to an end soon, but before we do that, we want to thank our presenters, the National Research the National Reparations Committee, the National Television Network, the National Cultural Foundation, Mr. Dovor and Ms. Valmore, the Ambassador Dublin for his message earlier, the Permanent Forum and Dr. Soomer, and all other UN agencies, and all of you who took time off to join NTN and the National Reparations Committee for this presentation in memory and observance of August 31st as the International Day for people of African descent. Here's hoping that we have enkindled and rekindled your consciousness as we prepare for serving 1 week from today on September 7, observing the second anniversary of the first CARICOM African Union Summit. We will see you there. But before we go, let us remind you of the book Africa 101, The Wake-Up Call, by Ambassador Arikana Chihombori-Quao. It is available on Amazon. And if you need more information, get in touch with Kofi and Althea and the members of the local chapter. From me to you folks, until next time, thanks for viewing, and remember, let us make every day a day for people of African descent. Thanks for watching.